Mr. Speaker, this government continues to add fuel to the inflationary fire, despite the finance minister's words that deficits must be reduced and that this is a line that cannot be crossed. Well, what happens? Inflation goes up, so interest rates goes up, so Canadians default on their mortgages and Canadians lose their homes. What's the solution? The solution is to stop the inflationary spending, stop the interest rates so that Canadians can have lower inflation rates and lower interest rates. Is the government ready to do this, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, it's unfortunate that the Conservatives don't believe that we can fight inflation and fight climate change at the same time. Yet, emissions and inflation are both coming down in Canada. Canadians have created over 900,000 new jobs. We have the lowest deficit and the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7. And in addition, the IMF and the OECD now both project that Canada will have the strongest economy in 2023 and in 2024. This gives us the tools that we need to address affordability. And of course, we have a national housing strategy, which is the first time the federal government has invested in housing in over 30 years.
Member for Calgary-Midnapore.
Have the greatest level of household debt in Canada that we have ever had. And as well, the IMF states that out of the G7, it is Canadians who are most likely to default on their mortgages. Wow. Even the finance minister recognizes that Canadians are struggling. She said that Canadians are facing hardships as a result of high interest rates. So then why doesn't this government commit to eliminating inflationary deficits, eliminating inflationary spending, so that Canadians can have lower inflation and lower interest rates, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing.
I'd like to thank my colleague for her question. As she knows, the National Housing Strategy is not just helping people to pay their rent. It's also to help them access the dream of owning a home. My colleagues on the other side voted against the budget, which had measures to help Canadians directly if they're struggling with mortgage payments under exceptional circumstances. I invite her to read that part of the budget and vote in favour of it.
False.
Speaker, the IMF warns Canada is at the greatest risk of home mortgage defaults in the world. This Liberal government's out-of-control spending and massive deficits have caused inflation to skyrocket. Canadians cannot absorb these higher rates, placing their dreams of home ownership at risk. Families are struggling, and they are struggling because of this Liberal government. Will the Prime Minister end his inflationary deficit spending?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Speaker, despite what the Conservatives say, everyone knows that inflation is a global phenomenon, but inflation in Canada is lower than our peer economies, and we have the best fiscal framework in the G7. Our budget not only retains this fiscal advantage, allows inflation to continue to decrease, makes life more affordable for Canadians, invests significantly in healthcare and in dental care, while creating high-paying, sustainable jobs to go above and beyond the close to 900,000 jobs that Canadians have already created.
The Honourable Member for Niagara Falls.
Speaker, Canadians simply can't afford the higher cost of living brought about by these Liberal government's policies. They are being forced to work more shifts or find a second job simply to get by. Canadians deserve our help, and Budget 2023 only makes the cost of living crisis worse. Conservatives are ready to work through the summer to fix their mistakes. Will this Liberal government cancel their vacation plans?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, my summer plans are going back and talking to my constituents, finding out possible solutions to make Canada better, and I hope that Conservatives will do the same. I wish that the Conservatives will do what they say, go over the summer, find solutions, and bring it to this House. The only solutions that they brought to this House so far is cancel the CBC, stop the fight against climate change, raid the pension benefits of seniors. Those are not viable solutions, Mr. Speaker. So if they can spend the summer coming up with some positive solutions, I'll be happy to work with them.
Well, not long ago, the Liberal Minister of Finance said, by exercising fiscal restraint and by not pouring fuel on the fire of inflation today, we will ensure we can responsibly invest in Canadians and in a Canadian economy for years to come. Yet, here we are, $60 billion in new spending and interest rates at their highest level in 22 years. They call that restraint? They're practicing about the same amount of restraint as a kid in a candy store. So when will they stop gouging Canadians and end their inflationary spending?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, we are putting forward a plan that is fiscally responsible. That's why inflation is coming down. If the member is not aware, it peaked at 8.1%. It's now at 4.4%. It is projected to go lower than 3%. If that member thinks that he's going to convince Canadians that he's going to make life more affordable by suggesting that we delete all the programs that make life more affordable, like dental care, like child care, like the CCB, like investing in retirement security for seniors, I don't think he's going to fool anybody other than perhaps the other members sitting on the other side of this House.
A member for Banff Airdrie.
Well, let's just talk a little bit about the people that are hardest hit by the.
Okay, hold on. I know someone doesn't know how to use their headset, maybe, so I just want to make sure people have their headsets on mute. I know it's the first day with some stuff like this. So, okay, ready? The honourable member for Banff Airdrie.
Let's talk about the people hardest hit by the Liberals' inflationary spending just for a minute here. They claim to be a champion of equality. They claim that, and they weave that word into every announcement they make. But for them, it's nothing more than a buzzword. In the words of one of the Prime Minister's own former advisors, government spending will impact disproportionately lower-income Canadians and young families, potentially creating divisions and threatening new sorts of inequality. So when will this government drop the platitudes and stop gouging the Canadians struggling the most?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Conservatives have no credibility when it comes to supporting families. When they were in power, they sent out checks to millionaires with their universal child benefit. Our Canada Child Benefit has supported tens of thousands of families in my riding alone, Mr. Speaker. If the Conservatives really want to support families, then they should support dental care, which has provided dental care for 1,100 members of constituents in the riding of Carleton, over 1,000 kids in my riding as well, Mr. Speaker. How about some solutions from the other side rather than just constant slogans?
Honorable député de Montmagny, Lillette, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup.
Mr. Speaker, for 8 years, this Prime Minister has spent lavishly, leading to devastating effects for Canadians. Accumulated deficits are leading to inflationary pressures. Everyone knows this. Inflation led to higher interest rates. The Bank of Canada just raised its rates. And now mortgage payments are higher. When will this Prime Minister finally understand that he has to stop inflationary spending that is pushing people out of their homes and into the streets? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister. I invite my honourable colleague to look at the budget because he can see very clearly that the deficit is going down over the next several years. All of that in spite of the contrary winds blowing around the world. Within G7 countries, our budget, our government, has the lowest deficit. We have the lowest debt. And our GDP to debt ratio is the lowest. It's thanks to our leadership that we were able to achieve these targets.
Mr. Speaker, 8 years of this Liberal government have given Canadians higher deficits, higher inflation, and higher interest rates, which of course leads to higher mortgage payments. According to a recent study by the International Monetary Fund, Canadians are now the most at risk to default on their mortgages. And this problem will only get worse as more and more Canadians renew their mortgages at higher interest rates. Mr. Speaker, when will the Prime Minister end his inflationary deficit spending?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, as I've had the opportunity to say many times in this House, our plan is fiscally responsible. Inflation is coming down. It's at 4.4%. We expect it to be less than 3% before the end of this year. At the same time, we're investing in making life more affordable, and we can afford to do that because we have the lowest deficit, and because we have the lowest net debt to GDP ratio, and because we have the fastest growing economic growth at 3.1% in the G7. We need to take advantage of our good fiscal framework and make sure that we make life more affordable for Canadians.